all my friends. I'm much pleased and extremely happy to meet you all through this webinar. At the outset, I give all glory and honor to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for materializing the seminar on superconductivity. I feel really blessed. I'm much grateful to the eminent principal of SCAD Polytechnic College, Mr. Manimaran, efficient vice principal, Mr. Sagaya Arokyaraj, the dynamic HOD, Mr. Selvaraj, active lecturers, Mrs. Nalini and Mrs. Gomati. With pleasure, I thank Mr. Anwar Raja, who has invited me as a resource person to this webinar. Well, when I was given an opportunity to present a webinar, I was thinking in different angles to fit into a topic. I know that I have a mixed group of technical college professors, arts and science college professors, along with their students who are enthusiastic. And at the same time, I'm also having viewers who are the well-wishers. So this webinar should benefit every people, and it should be a one which attracts the scientists and young researchers to update their knowledge in the field of physics. They should know what is happening in the current scenario in the superconducting field. So I was browsing the internet and looking to the topics with PowerPoints. The topic superconductivity flashed into my mind because it has overwhelming applications. The superconducting field has a tremendous hope in this current trend, and it can be used in all walks of life. The innumerable applications made me to name this webinar as Amazing Superconductivity. I hope after attending this seminar, you will also come to a conclusion that this superconductivity is amazing and it is a boon to the mankind. With these few words of introduction, I just move on to the contents. I'll be hinting about the type of conductors, then the discovery about superconductors. I will discuss about Meissner effect, what it will do in the effect of magnetic field. I will talk about the types of superconductors and explain the BCS theory and Josephson effect, along with the application of superconductors in various fields like industry, medicine, etc. Finally, we'll have a recap. Coming to the type of materials, we are having three materials: insulators, semiconductors, and conductors. In insulators, the band gap is very much, you are able to see the band gap, and then there is a difference between this band gap. It is so high, it lies between the filled conduction valence band and the empty conduction band. So the conduction of electrons is very, very difficult. They are classified as insulators. Example are glass, rubber, etc. Coming to the semiconductors, the band gap is very less. So by increasing slightly the temperature, the valence electrons can go to the conduction band. So the example of semiconductors are germanium, silica, etc. The last one you are seeing on the slide is conductors. There is no gap between valence band and conduction band. They just overlap. In that case, the conduction of electrons is very much. And now I am going to talk to you about another type of material, that is the superconductor. In the superconductor, the electrical resistance drops to zero at a conveniently higher temperature above absolute zero. This superconducting material finds its application in several fields. That is why I have taken that to be the webinar topic. Coming to electrical resistance is the property which opposes the flow of current through them. When you are going to talk about the analogy, you are having a narrow pipe which is lengthy. In that case, that pipe offers more resistance to the flow of water, whereas you are seeing another pipe which is at the bottom. It gives very less resistance to the flow of water. It is somewhat wider, but it is short also. The same thing applies to the wires also. Here in this wire, we are having the thin wire which is lengthy offers more resistance to the flow of current than the thick wire at the bottom, which will be offering less resistance to the flow of current. The resistance could be calculated using the formula R is equal to rho L divided by A, where R is the resistance, L is the length, A is the cross-sectional area, and rho the resistivity in ohm meter. Rho and conductivity sigma are inversely related. So when rho becomes 0, then conductivity will become infinite. Before the discovery of superconductors, people thought that the electrical resistance will become 0 only at absolute 0. But the physicist Heike Kamerlingh-Onnes, when he was doing some experiments with low temperature, he was doing the experiments with liquid hydrogen at the temperature of around 4.2 Kelvin. He was using the specimen to be metal mercury. The electrical resistance of metal mercury suddenly dropped to 0 at 4.2 Kelvin. For this discovery, he was awarded a Nobel Prize for Physics in the year 1913. In the same year, another scientist, he has found that lead could become a superconductor at 7.2 Kelvin. Here you are having the graph. In the graph along the x-axis, you are having the temperature, and along the y-axis, you are having the resistance taken. And here you are having the mercury to be the superconducting material, because when the mercury is, the electrical resistivity drops to 0. Here you are able to see the electrical resistivity drops to 0, and at 4.15 it absolutely comes to 0. So below this 4.15 Kelvin, the material is in the superconducting state, and above that it is in the normal state. And then when you are going to talk about the critical temperature, for certain elements and metals, it will lose its electrical resistivity to 0 at a particular temperature known as the critical temperature. At this critical temperature, there is a transition from normal to superconducting state. We can also define the temperature like that. It is a temperature at which the electrical resistance disappears at 0 magnetic field. So that particular temperature is known as the critical temperature. So in this state, the superconductor exhibits 0 electrical resistance. So rho will be equal to 0 for all temperatures less than critical temperature. Therefore, it has infinite conductivity in the superconducting mode. Coming to the superconducting elements, tin is found to superconduct at 3.72 Kelvin. Below the 3.72 Kelvin, the tin will act as a superconductor. Above 3.72 Kelvin, the tin will be acting as a normal conductor. Likewise, mercury has Tc as 4.15 Kelvin, lead as 7.19 Kelvin. Here, obtaining superconductivity at a very low temperature.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Ma'am, your presentation has been stopped. I think someone else started presenting. Could you please resume it? Participants, kindly do not present anything.
Okay. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, ma'am. Now we are.
Okay. So, I have shown you some pure elements which can become as a superconductor in the critical temperature, that is tin, mercury and lead. There are some superconducting compounds, that is niobium titanium with 10 Kelvin, niobium tin with 18.1 Kelvin. Obtaining low temperature to 4 Kelvin, 7 Kelvin, these are all very, very expensive and it is very hard. So scientists were experimenting on some other combination of metals so that the critical temperature could increase. So they were able to be successful by making niobium titanium a superconductor, which is an alloy at sufficiently higher temperature, that is 10 Kelvin. So this is how the superconductivity was finding its existence. In the periodic table, you have the blue blocks and green blocks. Nearly half of the metals can become a superconductor at a reduced temperature. And here, the blue colored blocks can become a superconductor with normal pressures, but at lower temperatures. On the other hand, when you're going to talk about the green blocks, they can become a superconductor at a reduced temperature as well as high pressures. This is the talk about the periodic table. Next is the critical field. I'm having a graph. In that graph, I'm having the x-axis to be the temperature, and in the y-axis, I'm having the critical field, that is H naught. So the field is applied to this critical field. Below this critical field and below this critical temperature, the material is in the superconducting state, and above that, the material will become a normal state. The critical field is a temperature dependent one. It varies from material to material. As I have already told you, the temperature at which the material loses its electrical resistivity at zero magnetic field is known as the critical temperature. I have given you the element along with the critical field and critical temperature. For example, when I take lead, the critical field is 0.0803 Tesla and critical temperature is 7.19. You can see that in the graph also, it is 7.19 along the temperature and the critical field is 0.08 along the y-axis. So below that particular curve, the lead will exist as the superconductor, and if we are increasing the temperature or if you are increasing the field, then it will become as a normal conductor. So I have given you the condition for the superconducting state. We can calculate the magnetic field, which is a critical one, Hc, for any particular temperature. That means Hc is the formula given for that. It will be equal to H naught into 1 minus T by Tc the whole square, where H naught will be the critical field at 0 Kelvin and T is the temperature below Tc. For example, if I take Pb, the temperature is 7.19 as the critical temperature. If I want to calculate the critical magnetic field or 5 Kelvin or 4 Kelvin, etc., I can use this formula and I have to substitute these values. In that case, I'll be able to calculate the critical field for a particular temperature T. In order to explain the persistent current, a material which could act as a superconductor is taken in the form of a ring. It is kept in the magnetic field and the temperature of the specimen was taken to be 9K and 8K or 8K. So which is above the critical temperature for lead. And when the experiment is proceeding, we reduce the temperature to 7K or 8K, 6K or 7K so that the electrical resistance becomes 0 in the superconducting state. So when the temperature is reduced, the material is getting transformed from normal to superconducting state. In that case, there will be a change in the magnetic flux lines. When the flux lines are changing, current is induced. The induced current will run for several years without any attenuation. It can be few amperes or few hundred amperes. In one particular experiment, the induced current was flowing for years together without any attenuation or decrease. But in conventional copper wire, we have I square R losses or losses due to Joule heating effect, which will attenuate or diminish the current flowing through a conductor. So, in a superconducting state, since the electrical resistance is 0, the induced current flows for several years. That current is known as the persistent current. In the year 1933, a breakthrough was obtained in the field of superconductivity. Two physicists, Walter Meissner and Robert Ochsenfeld, they were experimenting on tin and lead samples in the superconducting state. In that time, they were able to find that the magnetic field was repelled in the superconducting state, exhibiting perfect diamagnetism, that is B is equal to 0 inside the superconductor. So this effect is known as light is a perfect one. I need not even explain. This talks about the flux expulsion. For your understanding, I have given the critical temperature for lead as well as the critical field for lead. You are having a lead specimen in the shape of a ball. In that, with the uniform magnetic field, the flux lines are penetrating through this material. So the material is in the normal conducting mode above the temperature of the critical temperature, say 9K or 8K. In the second part of the experiment, the field is remaining the same, but it is cooled below the critical temperature. See the temperature, it is 5K or 4K. So the temperature is reduced below its Tc. So the flux lines are expelled out. When it was a normal conductor, the flux lines were penetrating into the lead ball, whereas when the temperature is reduced, the flux lines are expelled out or thrown out because the resistivity becomes 0 and the magnetic induction becomes 0 inside the superconducting material. I'm having another picture to explain this Meissner effect to a greater extent. So this principle of Meissner effect is used in the levitation of a magnet using a superconductor. You are having a material kept in the magnetic field. So the flux lines are passing through this material above the critical temperature. When the temperature is reduced, the flux lines are expelled out. Can you see this one? With the normal field, the flux lines are expelled since the material has become a superconductor. In the third picture, you are having a specimen which could act as a superconductor, and when the liquid nitrogen is poured into the vessel, the material will become a superconductor. At that time, when we bring a rare earth magnet to that, the magnet will be repelled by the superconducting material because it will expel the magnetic flux lines. I'm having a clear picture in the fourth one. You are able to see the magnet which is just floating in the air. The same principle is used in the superconducting magnetic levitated train. So the train will not touch the rails. It will be just floating above the rails without any physical contact. This is the principle behind the magnetic levitation. Coming to the type of superconductors, they are classified according to the temperature. The type 1 superconductors are soft superconductors, and when we are taking the applied field along the x-axis, below Hc, the material is in the superconducting state. When we are increasing the applied field, then the flux lines passes through the material, making it to the normal state. The uses of superconductors are the electric wire, the computer chips, etc. I have shown you some elements along with this critical temperatures. The superconductors with the critical temperature less than 25 Kelvin are called low temperature superconductors. Type 2 superconductors are otherwise known as hot superconductors. The hot superconductors have higher Tc than type 1 superconductors. When we are increasing the field along the x-axis, we are having one Hc1 that represents the lower critical field, Hc represents the critical field, Hc2 represents the upper critical field. From Hc1 to Hc2, the curve is decreasing gradually. That talks about the mixed state. In this mixed state, you are having the superconducting material as well as the normal state of the material to coexist, since the flux lines are penetrating gradually. After Hc2, it becomes a normal conductor. We are having many high temperature superconductors. I have already told you that obtaining a very low temperature is very difficult and it is also much expensive. So scientists have experimented with several combinations and alloys to bring the critical temperature to a higher scale. So iron-based superconductors, copper oxide superconductors, all this have the critical temperature above 25 K. So they are termed as hot superconductors. When you're going to talk about the mercury-based cuprous oxide, when it is subjected to high pressure of 13 gigapascal, the Tc increases to 164 Kelvin. So the temperature, critical temperature could be enhanced by applying high pressure. Coming to the application of superconductors, it is used in the manufacture of electromagnets for producing very strong magnetic fields. This is the bond diagram for the cuprate perovskite. It was discovered in the year 1987 by Paul Cho. The critical temperature ranges from 90 to 95 Kelvin. The critical field is, upper critical field is 100 Tesla at 77 Kelvin. The critical current is 1 into 10 power 9 ampere meter square at 77 Kelvin, and it is referred to as 123 superconductor because it is having yttrium as one portion, barium as 2, copper as 3. So 1:2:3 ratio they are present. That is why it is referred to as 123 superconductor, and it falls under type 2 superconductors. Coming to the difference between type 1 and type 2 superconductors, mainly temperature plays the major role. Lower temperatures are present for type 1 superconductors, whereas higher temperatures with critical temperatures are classified under type 2 superconductors. Under type 1, there is a sudden loss of magnetization in the curve we have seen. In type 2, there is a gradual loss of magnetization. Type 1 superconductors exhibit Meissner effect completely, whereas type 2, they exhibit partially from Hc1 to Hc2. There is no mixed state in type 1, but there is mixed state present in type 2. Type 1 is soft superconductor, type 2 is hard superconductor. And when you're going to talk about type 1 superconductor, they are elements and simple alloys will be there. Whereas in type 2 superconductors, we are having iron-based, copper oxide-based superconductors. When the scientists were working on superconductivity, they were finding higher temperature superconductors, as well as they wanted to know the secrecy behind the superconductors. They want to know the theory behind the superconductors. In the year 1957, American physicists John Bardeen, Leon Cooper, and John Schiffer, they jointly put forth the theory of superconductivity known as the BCS theory. These letters were taken from the first letter of the last name of each scientist, and I have highlighted them as BCS. And jointly, they won a Nobel Prize in the year 1972. According to them, they said there is an attractive interaction between two electrons. Normally, when we are going to talk about the electrons, there will be a repulsive force. From childhood, we know that like poles attract, like poles repel, and opposite poles attract. And when you are going to talk about electrons, they just repel. In BCS theory, he says that there is an attractive interaction between two electrons due to the phonon exchange, overcoming the usual repulsive Coulomb interaction. So the electrons will be moving in resonance with the lattice vibrations. This is a well-defined picture about the Cooper pairs. At a very extremely low temperatures, the electron can draw the positive ions nearer to it. So in that case, this region will become more positive and it will be attracting other electron towards it. So this is the secret behind the attraction between the two electrons. At higher TC with different superconducting systems, the BCS theory became inadequate. At lower temperatures, absolute zero or nearer to absolute zero, this BCS theory holds good, whereas at higher temperatures, this BCS theory could not give a correct explanation. So other theories were put forth. In 1962, Brian Josephson, a graduate student from Cambridge University, he came with the Josephson effect. For that, he used a Josephson junction. The Josephson junction is made up of two superconductors separated by an insulator. And here, this is a well-defined picture. There are two superconductors. They are separated by an insulator or a non-superconducting material. In that case, this type of junction is known as the Josephson junction, and the electron pass, it can tunnel through this barrier. This tunneling of the electrons through the barrier is known as the Josephson effect. When they are tunneling through the barrier, it passes the current through the superconductors. It will exhibit a quantum effect on a macro scale, which won him a Nobel Prize in the year 1973. In the Josephson junction, we have the Josephson current. The current flows between two superconductors separated by an insulator, even in the absence of applied voltage. This is his finding, which gave him the Nobel Prize. I have shown you the SQUID with double junction quantum interferometer. SQUID is nothing but superconducting quantum interference device. We are having two junctions, 1 and 2. It is separating the two superconductors. So it is a double junction quantum interferometer. This SQUID is an instrument which is capable of detecting even the weakest magnetic fields. There are two types of SQUIDs. One is the RF SQUID. It has only one junction. You can see from here, there is only one junction. In DC SQUIDs, we have two or more junctions. I have shown a DC SQUID with two junctions. It is more expensive and it is difficult to produce, but the DC SQUIDs are much more sensitive. Uses of the SQUIDs are, they are used to study earthquakes, they are used in removing paramagnetic impurities, detection of magnetic signals from brain, heart, etc. Coming to the application of superconductors, we are having enormous applications here. We are using the superconductors in all walks of life, and they are useful to the mankind. I can tell you that it is a boon to the mankind. So, in the field of magnets, they find its application in high field magnets, magnetic levitation, magnetic shielding, NMR, large machines, ore refining, etc. In energy or power related field, it finds its application in electric power storage and transmission, magnetic energy storage, power production, etc. In transportation, it is used in high-speed maglev trains, ship drive systems, etc. So, in electronic and other small devices, it is used in SQUIDs, bolometer. In computer and information processing, it is used in Josephson devices, optoelectronics, FETs, AD converters, etc. So, these applications are innumerable, and due to want of time, I'll be highlighting few applications to you. Coming to the magnetic levitation, I have already spoken about this magnetic levitation when I was explaining the Meissner effect. Levitation is a process in which the electromagnet is levitated or floating in air above a superconductor without any physical contact. So, in Japan, Shanghai Transrapid company is running a superconducting train. The speed of it is 430 km per hour. It is covering a distance of 30.5 kilometers. This distance is from Shanghai International Airport to Shanghai Central Station. The time for travel is 7 or 8 minutes. Within a very, very short time, it is covering a distance of 30.5 kilometers. This is possible because the train is not touching the rails, it just floats in the air so that it can achieve a very high speed of 430 km per hour. In order to explain more about this superconducting magnetic levitation, I am explaining this. The track of the superconducting trains are fitted with continuous series of vertical coils, as you are seeing in the picture, which is not a superconductor. So the rails of the train is not the superconductor. When the train is passing by, the motion of the superconducting magnet in the train induces a current in the coil which is present in the track. So they make it an electromagnet. The superconducting electromagnetics on the train and outside electromagnet on the rail will produce forces so that the train just floats over the track. So it levitates the train. A wave of electric current sweeps and propels the train in the forward direction. The next one I'm going to tell you is about the superconducting quantum interference device. In the device, we can detect the weakest magnetic field, as we have already seen. It is a double junction quantum interferometer. They are used in mine detection equipment to help in the removal of the landmines. In order to remove these landmines, the squid are being used. கண்ணி வெடி எடுப்பதற்கு இது பயன்படுகிறது. We are also using E-bombs. You are seeing the picture of a E-bomb with all the internal structures which are marked. USA is developing the E-bombs to create a fast, high-intensity electromagnetic pulse. These E-bombs are used. It can destroy or disable the enemy's electronic equipment. When the electronic equipment is disabled, then the country cannot make the war or intensify the war. In March 2003, when USA was attacking the Iraq, it has used the E-bombs on the Iraq broadcast facility. These E-bombs can release a very huge amount of energy, say 2 billion watts instantaneously at the same instant of time. So it is equal to 2 into 10 to the power 9 watts. We are using the tube lights in our house. The tube lights have some 20 watt or 100 watt or 1000 or 2000 like that. But can you imagine 2 followed by 9 zeros? Such a tremendous energy is released instantly. So this is the speciality about the superconductors. Such a high energy can be given by these E-bombs. The next is the Hadron Collider. This Hadron Collider or particle accelerator is using extremely powerful electromagnets, and they can accelerate the charged particle to a greater extent. They can even accelerate the particle to the speed of light, which is nothing but 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter by second. So superconductivity is an amazing one. It can be useful to create powerful electromagnets to accelerate a particle. The next is electricity generation and transportation. The efficient superconducting generators are very, very small sized than the conventional copper generators. Their efficiency is also most. The efficiency of a generator could be 99%. Still, the size of the copper generator is a big one. The typical generators are less efficient than this high efficiency of the superconducting generators. The superconductors are efficient conductors. As I have already told you, when the electrical resistance rho is 0, the conductivity is infinite. Since the conductivity is infinite, it could be used in the national grid. Nowadays, we are using aluminum in the national grid. But if you are using superconductor, then our savings would be enormous because there will not be any power loss. In the conventional system, to transform the electricity to a higher voltage, we are reducing the current so that the power loss is minimum in the generating side. And when it is being distributed, we step down the voltage to distribute it to houses and industries. So stepping up and stepping down, all these processes wants many power. There is a power loss also. But when we are using superconductor for this transportation system, then the power loss could be no more. So it will be an efficient one. Next, the superconducting magnet. You are able to see a person very small in front of a giant magnetic system. We are having 8 enormous superconducting magnets, gray tubes, and the principle is very, very simple. That is, the electrical resistivity becomes 0 in the superconducting state. We are also having the superconducting processors. A superconducting processor does not generate much heat. That is the speciality about superconductors. This processor is only 4 bits compared with our 32-bit or 64-bit microprocessors. Even though it has 4 bits, the processor is 500 times faster than today's common Intel processor. So if the processor is made of superconducting material, then we need small bits as well as the efficiency and the time is also faster. NASA and NSF are working for developing a superconducting chip. We are seeing an NMR instrument which uses the superconductor. This is a boon to the mankind. When we are talking about the medical applications, the superconductors can perform a life-saving function in the field of biomagnetism. It could show the brain activity, the brain tumor, the defective cells, etc. The nuclear magnetic resonance scanning is much helpful to separate the damaged cells and the healthy cells. Superconductors are also used in the field of electronics. They are used in the field effect transistors. So here you are using the superconducting thin film, and they are also used in semiconducting device. So superconductor finds its application in almost all walks of life and in various fields. So next is the superconducting solenoid. Solenoid is a coil of wire used as an electromagnet. It converts electrical energy to the mechanical energy. So you are seeing a giant structure which converts the electrical energy to the mechanical energy. This is all possible with superconductors. So Superconductors are finding its application in every field, and it is amazing and marvelous. The energy released is tremendous. So I could go on and on, but due to want of time, I'm restricting myself. And let us have the recap. We have seen the types of conductors. We have seen about the discovery of superconductors. I have discussed about the Meissner effect, and I have showed you how it is being used in the magnetic levitated trains. I have told you about the effect of magnetic field, and I have classified the types of superconductors as type 1 and type 2 and explained them. And I have explained the BCS theory along with the Josephson effect. Finally, I have highlighted the application of superconductors in the industrial field as well as in the medical field. So thank you. So I personally feel that there is a lot of scope for young researchers and scientists in the superconducting field. So I wish all of you who have attended this seminar good luck, and I'm sure you have been benefited to the greatest extent.